They said it loud enough for her to hear. God, can you imagine trying to dance with that? You'd throw your back out. The whole little circle of them laughed. And the woman they were laughing at, standing alone at the edge of the most glittering ballroom in the city, felt herself begin to disappear. Then, across the room, a man set down his glass. He crossed the entire floor. He stopped in front of her, held out his hand, and when she couldn't move, he leaned in and asked her something quiet. She gave the smallest nod, and he lifted her into his arms and carried her to the very center of the dance floor. Nobody was laughing now, because nobody in that ballroom knew the secret, that the woman they'd called too heavy to dance had once been the most gifted dancer this city had ever produced. And they were about to be reminded. This is the story of Mira Costa. And the night she danced again. Mira Costa used to be the best dancer in the room. Any room. When she was a girl, she'd been a prodigy. The kind that teachers whisper about. She'd trained at the Avalon Academy, the most prestigious ballet school in the city, the one that fed the great companies. And from the age of 8, everyone said the same thing about Mira Costa. That one's going to be a star. She had something the others didn't. It wasn't just technique, though her technique was flawless. It was joy. When Mira danced, the whole room leaned in. She didn't just hit the steps. She meant them. Her teachers used to say she danced like she was telling you a secret. And then her body changed. The way bodies do. Mira grew up. She grew curves. She grew soft and round and womanly, the way some women simply do, no matter what they eat or how many hours they train. In the dance world, she'd given her whole childhood to look at the body she'd grown into and decided she no longer belonged. It happened at 17. The Academy's artistic director, a cold, elegant woman named Helena Voss, called Mira into her office. And Madame Voss looked at the most gifted student she had, the girl everyone said would be a star, and she said the words that ended Mira's whole world. You have lovely feet, Mira. Truly. But this is ballet. We sell a line, a look, and you, a delicate pause, a glance down Mira's body. You've become the wrong shape for the stage. No company will ever cast you now. I'm doing you a kindness telling you the truth. Find another dream. The wrong shape. Mira had walked out of that office at 17, and she had not danced. Not really, not for herself, for 15 years. She built a life anyway. She was good at surviving. She was 32 now, a size 18, with the strong legs and straight back of a dancer. She no longer let herself be. And she found a way to stay near the things she loved without it being able to hurt her anymore. She ran a studio, a tiny, joyful, perpetually broke little studio called Second Step in a cheap part of town where Mira taught dance to the children nobody else would take. The heavy kids, the kids in wheelchairs, the kids with 2 left feet and crooked spines and bodies the fancy academies took one look at and turned away. The kids who'd been told, like Mira had, that they were the wrong shape for the dream. Mira taught them all. She taught them that their bodies were not problems. That joy was the whole point. That anyone could dance. She just never danced herself. She'd teach the steps, demonstrate with her hands, count the time. But she never let go and danced full out. Not anymore. Madame Voss had taken that from her at 17, and Mira had never found her way back to it. Second Step was drowning in debt. And that was why Mira Costa did the one thing she swore she'd never do. She went back to the Avalon Academy. The Academy was holding its 50th anniversary gala, a glittering black tie fundraiser. And along with it, they'd announced a new community arts grant. A real one. Enough money to keep a small studio alive for years. And they'd invited the 3 finalists to the gala to represent their programs. Second Step was a finalist. Mira knew exactly what walking back into that building would cost her. But she didn't have a choice. The grant could save the studio. It could save dance for 50 kids who had nowhere else. So she put on the one nice gown she owned, a deep midnight blue that hugged her curves, and she drove back to the place that had broken her heart for the sake of children who deserved better than she'd gotten. She had no idea that the most powerful man in the room was about to change everything. His name was Theo Hawk, and he didn't belong there either. Theo was 39, a self-made billionaire who'd built a technology fortune from absolutely nothing. He'd grown up poor, dirt poor, the kind of poor the people at this gala couldn't imagine, and he clawed his way up with nothing but brains and stubbornness. And now he was the Avalon Academy's single biggest donor. The reason the lights stayed on, the guest of honor at this very gala. The people at the Academy adored Theo Hawk's money. They did not adore Theo Hawk. You saw it every time he walked in. The little flickers of contempt under the wide smiles. New money. Came from nothing. Doesn't even know which fork to use. They took his checks with one hand and looked down their noses with the other. They thought he didn't notice. He noticed everything. Theo's mother had loved to dance. He remembered her, when he was small, dancing barefoot in their tiny kitchen to the radio, spinning him around, laughing. She'd never had a lesson in her life. She'd never been allowed through Avalon's front door. But she danced with more joy than anyone Theo had ever seen since. He funded the arts because of her, and he stayed at gilded galas full of people who despised him because somewhere he kept hoping he'd find a little of that joy again. He never did. Just cold, beautiful people doing cold, beautiful steps. Until a woman in midnight blue walked in, and Theo Hawk felt something in the room change. Mira didn't know anyone. She stood at the edge of the ballroom, clutching a glass she wasn't drinking, trying to be invisible until the grant was announced. It didn't work, because Madame Helena Voss, older now, but just as cold, still running the academy with an iron hand, spotted her across the room, and recognition lit her elegant face, followed by something crueler. Well, Madame Voss announced to the little circle of socialites and former dancers around her, loud enough to carry, I don't believe it. Mira Costa, the girl I had to let go years ago. She had such potential before she, a delicate gesture at all of Mira, rather let it go. A thin laugh from the circle. And now she runs some little charity dance class. For the grant, no doubt. How sweet. Though I do wonder who taught her to dance in that body. Did you bring a partner, Mira? You want a strong one. The circle laughed. And one of them, a sleek former dancer with a champagne flute and a vicious smile, delivered the line that cut the deepest. God, can you imagine trying to dance with that? She said, eyes raking Mira up and down. You'd throw your back out. They should reinforce the floor. The laughter rose, and Mira Costa, 32 years old, a teacher who'd given everything to teach children their bodies were not problems, stood frozen at the edge of that ballroom and felt 17 again. Felt the wrong shape. Felt herself starting to shrink, to disappear, the way she'd learned to disappear in that office 15 years ago. She set down her glass with a shaking hand. She was going to leave. She was going to walk out and forget the grant, and that's a strange thing to laugh about. The voice came from beside her. Low, calm, and it carried. The whole circle turned, and their faces changed, fast, because the man who'd spoken was Theo Hawk, the guest of honor, the man whose money kept their precious academy alive. Mr. Hawk, Madame Voss said quickly, the cruelty smoothing in a charm. You were mocking a woman for her body, Theo said. He wasn't smiling. In a building I pay for. At a gala I'm hosting. Loudly enough that I heard it across the room. He let that sit. I grew up poor, Madame Voss. So I know that particular laugh very well. It's the sound people make when they've decided someone doesn't belong. I've heard it pointed at me in this very room more times than you'd believe. His eyes were cold now. I just never expected to hear it and have the chance to do something about it. He turned away from them entirely. And he looked at Mira, and something in his face gentled. It said, you can't dance, he said quietly, just her now. Is that true? Myra's eyes were burning. It was true, she whispered. A long time ago, this was the only thing I was. And they took it. I haven't danced, really danced, in 15 years. Theo Hawk held out his hand. Dance with me, he said. Right now, in front of all of them. I can't. Mira shook her head, tears spilling now. Theo, I don't even know you. I can't, they're right. I'm not. You're not what they say you are, Theo said. And I think you know it. I think it's been waiting in you for 15 years. He kept his hand out. One dance. If I'm wrong, we'll laugh it off and I'll buy your studio's grant myself. But I don't think I'm wrong. His voice dropped. Will you let me carry you out there? Just to the floor. The rest is yours. And Mira Costa, who had not danced for herself since she was 17, looked at this stranger's steady hand, and at the cruel faces behind him, and at 15 years of being told she was the wrong shape. And she nodded. Theo Hawk swept her up in his arms, easily, like she weighed nothing, like the very idea that she was too heavy was the joke it had always been, and he carried her straight through the parting crowd to the very center of the dance floor. The music was playing, a waltz, and he set her down gently on her feet in the middle of everything, with 300 of the city's most powerful people watching. Now, Theo murmured, taking her hand in her waist. Show them. And Mira Costa began to dance. It came back to her all at once. 15 years gone in a single breath. Her body remembered everything. The line, the float, the impossible lightness she'd been told her body couldn't hold. And the joy. God, the joy. She danced the way she had as a girl, like she was telling the whole room a secret, and Theo Hawk, it turned out, could actually dance because of a mother in a tiny kitchen long ago. Moved with her, the two outsiders turning in the center of a ballroom that had gone completely, utterly silent. Because they were watching the wrong-shaped woman dance more beautifully than anyone in that room had ever danced in their lives. When the music ended, Mira stood breathless in the center of the floor, 15 years of grief, and 15 seconds of pure joy crashing through her at once. And the room, the cold, beautiful, contemptuous room, did the only thing it could. It applauded, helplessly, because it had just seen the truth, and the truth was undeniable. Madame Helena Voss did not applaud. She stood at the edge of the floor, white-faced, watching the girl she'd thrown away dance like a star in front of the donor she could not afford to lose. She had told a 17-year-old to find another dream. She had just watched that dream walk back through her own front door and make a liar of her in front of everyone. Theo found Mira on the gala's terrace afterward, where she'd gone to breathe, her heart still pounding from the dance, and everything it had cracked open. "You okay?" he asked, joining her at the railing. "I don't know what I am," Mira said honestly, laughing and crying at once. "I haven't felt it. I forgot. I made myself forget what it felt like. Because remembering hurt too much." She looked at him. "Why did you do that?" "You don't even know me." "Because I know that laugh," Theo said. "I've spent 15 years being the man these people are happy to take money from and ashamed to be seen with. The outsider with the wrong accent and the wrong background and the wrong fork." He shrugged. "I watched a room full of people who think they're better than both of us decide you were a joke. And I happened to be standing next to someone who could prove them wrong." He smiled. "Turns out the joke was on them. You're the best dancer in this whole building, and it isn't close. I run a dance studio for kids nobody else will take," Mira said quietly. "Heavy kids. Kids in wheelchairs. Kids who got told what I got told. I teach them their bodies aren't problems." Her voice broke, and I haven't been able to believe it about myself for 15 years. Until about 10 minutes ago, on a dance floor with a stranger. Theo Hawk looked at her for a long moment. "Tell me about your studio," he said. "All of it. I want to hear everything." So she did. And he listened, really listened, the way almost no one ever had. What grew between them over the following weeks was the slowest, sweetest thing. Theo Hawk started showing up at Second Step, the Billionaire, in a part of town his peers wouldn't drive through, sitting on the floor while a 6-year-old in a wheelchair taught him the robot. He fixed the leaky roof without being asked. He learned the kids' names. He watched Mira teach, watched her light up the room, and he fell, quietly and completely, for the woman who'd convinced 50 children their bodies were nothing to be ashamed of. And Mira slowly let her guard down. She started dancing again. Not just teaching, dancing full out, joyful, in front of her kids who cheered every time. She was coming back to life, one step at a time. She should have known the cold, beautiful world wouldn't let it be simple. The blow came through Madame Voss. The Academy grant, the one Mira had walked into that gala, was announced. And Second Step didn't win it. Madame Voss made sure of that. But there was a crueler twist. The Academy announced it was launching its own inclusive community program, using ideas suspiciously identical to Mira's, with Avalon's prestigious name attached and Theo Hawk's funding behind it, whether Theo liked it or not. Voss had moved to erase Mira entirely, to take her idea, her mission, even the man who admired her, and folded all into the academy that had thrown her away. And then Voss did the thing cruel people do. She found Mira privately and twisted the knife. You must know what this looks like, dear, Voss said almost gently. A billionaire, playing in the slums with a charity case. It's a phase. A guilty rich man's hobby. He'll tire of it. Of you, the moment something more elegant comes along. You were the wrong shape for the stage 15 years ago. You're the wrong shape for his world now. Do the dignified thing. Step aside before he embarrasses you both. And Mira, whose oldest wound was being told she didn't belong, believed her. She pulled back from Theo. She told him the academy could run the program better with their name and reach. She told him she was just a teacher with a leaky roof and he was a billionaire, and they both knew how it really ended. She told him to let her go. I'm a phase, Theo, she said, her voice shaking. A guilty rich man's hobby. I'd rather you go now than watch you realize it later. I've been the wrong shape my whole life. I know how this ends. Do you? Theo said quietly. It wasn't a question, and there was something in his voice she'd never heard before. Mira, who told you that? Was it Voss? Did she find you? Mira said nothing, which was an answer. Theo Hawk stood very still for a moment, and then his tired eyes went hard and clear. Right, he said. I think it's time I reminded everyone exactly whose money keeps the lights on. Theo did not get loud. He didn't have to. He did what self-made men do when cornered. He moved. He withdrew every dollar of his funding from the Avalon Academy. All of it. The endowment, the scholarships, the gleaming new wing with the Hawk name on it. Gone in a single letter, leaving Madame Voss's precious institution suddenly, catastrophically short. And then he took every cent of it, and more, and he poured it into Second Step. He didn't fund Avalon's stolen inclusive program. He killed it by funding the real one. He bought the building Mira rented and signed it over to the studio. He set up an endowment that would keep Second Step alive for 50 years. He turned a broke little dance class for the kids nobody wanted into the best-funded community arts program in the entire city, with Mira Costa's name on the door and no one else's. And then he made one more move, the kind that ends careers in that small, vicious world. He let it be quietly known, in every gilded room that mattered, exactly why he'd pulled his money, that the Avalon Academy, under Helena Voss, had spent decades telling gifted children they were the wrong shape, and had tried to steal the work of a woman they'd thrown away. The donors started asking questions. The board started meeting. And within a season, the cold, elegant woman who'd ended a 17-year-old's dream found her own grip on the academy, slipping away, undone, in the end, by the very girl she'd been so sure didn't matter. She'd spent her whole life deciding who was the wrong shape for the room. She never once imagined the room could decide she was. Theo found Mira at the studio that evening, in the empty dance hall, sitting alone on the floor in the dark. You did all that, Mira said. For a phase. For a hobby. Come here, Theo said. He sat down beside her on the floor. The billionaire, in his good suit, the way he always did. I need to tell you something, and I need you to actually hear it this time. He took her hand. I didn't fund your studio because I pity you. I funded it because it's the best thing I've ever put my money into, and because the woman who built it is the most extraordinary person I've ever met. He turned to face her. Voss told you the wrong shape for my world. So let me be clear about something, Mira. I don't have a world. I have a fortune and a pile of cold rooms full of people who can't stand me. You're the first thing that's ever felt like home. His voice roughened. My mother danced barefoot in a tiny kitchen with more joy than anyone in that whole gala. I've spent my whole life trying to find that again. And I found it the night I watched you dance. He held her gaze. You're not the wrong shape. You're the only shape I've ever wanted. And I'm in love with you. Not as a hobby. As the rest of my life, if you'll have me. Mira Costa looked at this man, sitting on her studio floor in the dark, who'd burned down an institution rather than let her believe she was a phase. I haven't let myself want anything in 15 years, she whispered. Then let's start with one thing, Theo said. Dance with me. No ballroom. No audience. Just here. Just us. And there in the dark, empty studio, with no music but the sound of the city outside, Mira Costa stood up and danced with the man who loved her, exactly as she was, And for the first time in 15 years, she wasn't telling the room a secret. She was just happy. They were married in the spring, in the studio, surrounded by 50 children in their best clothes and homemade costumes. There was, of course, dancing. Mira danced at her own wedding, full out, joyful, radiant, a size 18 and luminous. And not one single person in that room would have dared to call her too heavy, because not one single person in that room could take their eyes off her. Second Step grew into something extraordinary. A whole network of studios, eventually in cities across the country. Places where any child of any body could come and learn that joy was the whole point. Mira ran all of it. And every studio had the same words painted over the door. The words she'd been told at 17 and had spent her whole life proving wrong. There is no wrong shape for the dance. One evening, long after, Theo found his wife alone in the original studio after the children had gone home, dancing slowly by herself in the last of the light, just because she could. "What's that look?" she asked, catching him in the mirror. "Just thinking," Theo said, crossing the floor to her. "About a woman who hadn't danced in 15 years. He took her in his arms, in a room full of people who were so busy laughing that they missed the most beautiful thing they'd ever see. He kissed her forehead. They told you to find another dream, Mira, and instead you went and built a place where nobody ever has to." And Mira Costa, dancer, teacher, wife, the woman they called the wrong shape, leaned into the only person who'd ever carried her toward the thing she loved instead of away from it. And she finally understood, all the way down, the thing she'd spent 15 years teaching children and never quite believing about herself. She was never too heavy. She was never the wrong shape. The dream was never too big for her body. The world was just too small to see her. And now it never would be again. So that's the story of how a woman they called too heavy to dance became the best dancer in the room, and built a place where no child would ever be told they were the wrong shape again. Madame Voss spent her whole career deciding who deserved the dream. And she learned, far too late, that the people you throw away have a way of coming back to dance on the very stage you barred them from. Mira proved that your body is never the thing standing between you and joy. The only thing standing in the way is the people small enough to laugh, and they were never worth listening to in the first place. Did that dance floor moment give you chills? Did Mira finally dancing again bring a tear to your eye? If you believe there's no wrong shape for the dance, or for love, go ahead and tap that like button. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it tonight. And subscribe to Elena Love Stories and ring that bell. Because here, the woman the world overlooks always gets the ending she deserves. Now tell me down in the comments, would you have walked onto that dance floor or walked out the door?